Sam, are you about ready?
Yes, it's a glorious 3-hour finale.
You got a minute and a half.
For your own safety and the safety of other drivers, please do not bump the car ahead of you or stop your car in the middle of the track.
Ellen, since this is your dream, we'll let you make the first selection.
All right, Alex. I will take eeny, meeny, miny, fossil fuels for, let's go for 100.
Fine. The answer is...
WDW Radio, your information station. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the WDW Radio Show, your Walt Disney World information station. I am your host, Lou Mongello, and this is show number 313 for the week of February 24th, 2013. I'm here to help you have the best possible Disney vacation experience and bring you a little bit of Disney magic wherever you are with this podcast, my videos, blog, live broadcasts, events, my Walt Disney World trivia books, audio tours, and more. You can find everything over at WDWRadio.com. This week's podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Audible.com. You can get a free audiobook download at audibletrial.com/WDW Radio. With more than 100,000 titles to choose from, you can download it for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Audible has a number of great Disney titles as well, including Ridley Pearson's Kingdom Keeper series. You can sign up for free over at audibletrial.com/WDW Radio. So this week, we're going to continue exploring Disney's Boardwalk Resort as we recently spent time wandering the lobby and lounge to discover the stories, history, and details. Now, come with us as we virtually tour the Luna Park pool area and discover what inspired this play area and its many details. Then, follow along with me and Jim Korkis as we wander the promenade around Crescent Lake, stopping to discuss the boardwalk, shops, restaurants, and details, both inside and out. We'll also discuss the boardwalk that might have been and the concepts that never made it to reality. I'll then have the answer to our last Walt Disney World trivia question of the week and pose a new challenge for your chance to win a Disney prize package. I'll also announce a new WDW Radio event and meet coming in March before playing some of your voicemails at the end of the show. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of the WDW Radio Show. We recently explored on show number 310 the stories, the history, both real and imagineered, the details, and so much more about one of my favorite resorts here at Walt Disney World. It's Disney's Boardwalk. And we are back again, sitting outside this time. We talked about the lobby, we talked about the decor and the theming and the Bellevue Lounge, but now we're sitting outside on the promenade. And as I sit here, anyone who's ever been to Atlantic City or Coney Island and has strolled the boardwalks will certainly recognize the inspiration for so many of the different elements out here that Disney has brought into this experience. So as we continue our journey exploring Disney's Boardwalk Resort, I am joined once again by my good friend, fellow funnel cake lover, and Disney historian and author, Jim Korkis.
And again, yeah, I had a lot of fun with you on show 310, going through and discovering all those details inside, and now we've got an opportunity to talk about outside. I also want to give a shout out to Bruce, who put in some comments in the comments section. And Bruce, you are absolutely right. Steeplechase, the steeplechase ride, those were wooden horses. It was a steel track. There was also a different version of it somewhere else besides Coney Island. And you're also right, the Flip-Flap Railway was not taken from Coney Island to Atlantic City. Atlantic City built an exact duplicate, and they sometimes called that loop-the-loop or looping the loop, because in those days, intellectual property, nobody cared. They saw something, they didn't even have to change the color. Here, we're just going to build this elsewhere. And so I also bring that out not only to give Bruce his props, but for the rest of you, if you have other things to add, we'd love to hear them in the comments section. Or if you've heard a different version, or you know something else, please. And again, Lou and I will always tell you, nobody can know everything. So sometimes out here, while we're actually looking right at the funnel cakes here and drooling. So if our mind goes off into funnel cakes and we get the wrong date, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate to go, oh, you said it was 1870. It's really 1873. What's the matter with you? So anyway, we're outside. But before we go right to the boardwalk, Lou and I have decided to take just a little side trip. Where are we, Lou?
Well, I think it makes sense, Jim. Having gone in from the inside and talking about sort of setting up the story and the theming, then we need to sort of continue as part of the hotel experience out to the pool area, because that very much is an important part, and certainly there's clear inspiration that came from its namesake, which is Luna Park.
Right, and for those of you who listened to show 310, and you should, because there will be a written test. Next time you go to a meet and greet with Lou, there'll be a written test on this. And again, it's not multiple choice, it's only short answer, so you need to know. You know that the boardwalk was set in the time period of 1920s, 1930s, and they combined elements of not only the Atlantic City boardwalk, but also Coney Island. Coney Island had its own boardwalk and also had a big, huge Elephant Hotel and many similarities to Atlantic City. Now, Luna Park pool here is very important in terms of telling part of that story, and a lot of people just miss this entirely. They go and they say, "Oh, well, it's a carnival atmosphere out here." No, it's Luna Park. The very first, there was Sea Lion Park, which was a small amusement venue there in Coney Island, but the first really big amusement park was Steeplechase Park, George Tilliou's park, and George Tilliou was a smart guy. One of the things he saw was in 1901 at the Pan American Exposition, that's basically a World's Fair, was the very first what we would call illusion ride. And it was created by Frederick Thompson and Elmer Skip Dundee. It was called A Trip to the Moon. And so you paid your money, you went into this auditorium, there was this airship that you boarded, and you looked out through portholes, and you saw projected on the walls planets and outer space and comets flying by, and the ship was being rocked, and it was so realistic. There was a newspaper report that said men screamed and women fainted. And there's about 30 people in the airship, and then once it stopped, you exited into this auditorium, which was done sort of almost like a cave on the moon, and there were these little moon guides that would come up and give you a piece of cheese, because we all know that the moon is made of green cheese. Very, very, very impressive. But George Tilliou was smart enough to go, look, this is only going to be here for 1 year at the World's Fair. I'm going to bring it to Steeplechase Park. And he did for the 1902 season, and by golly, it was a huge hit. And at that particular point, Thompson and Dundee took a look and said, we could do this. So they got the area that was Sea Lion Park, and they transformed it into the second large Coney Island amusement park called Luna Park. And remember, the name of their attraction was A Trip to the Moon, and in Latin, moon is Luna. And also, Luna was the name of the airship that you took to go to the moon. And but of course, Dundee also pointed out that by golly, his sister's name was Luna. And Thompson and Dundee are referenced here at the Boardwalk. On the Boardwalk, there's a shop, Thimbles and Threads, and it has F. Thompson, proprietor. That's Frederick Thompson. And upstairs, inside in the interior, you see Dundee Sundries, serving the Boardwalk since 1902. Well, that's Elmer Dundee. And again, serving since 1902, that's because that's when Trip to the Moon was brought to Steeplechase Park. Well, Luna Park opened in 1903 and lasted until 1944. Did you know any of this, Lou?
Of course I come. Don't we all? Don't we all have all these dates and names memorized?
And as we look out here, we see actually references to Luna Park. You know, one of the things that might come up to you is, what are all these elephants doing out here by a pool? And again, the logical assumption is, oh, well, it must be the circus, or the circus came to Coney Island, or whatever. No, in Luna Park, they had their own private herd of elephants that they let roam freely through the park, believe it or not. And one of the most popular attractions at Luna Park was elephant rides. Now, I don't know how many of you know about elephants or about cleaning elephants, or and cleaning elephants is an awful lot like you see in cartoons and all that, with the long brushes, and you're trying to scrub the back and all of that. Well, they were smart enough to figure, you know, this is time-consuming, this is a pain in the butt, but elephants smell. Why don't we just take them out, trot them out to the Atlantic Ocean, and they'll bathe in the ocean? And not only will they bathe out there, that saves it, but it's great publicity, because people see these elephants running around in the ocean, they're squirting water and all this, and then they go, well, instead of going to Steeplechase, I want to go to Luna Park, and so they go trotting back. But you know, Lou, I'll bet there's something in the Luna Park pool that you do know, right? That relates to a famous Disney animated film.
So when we were talking about Luna Park, I was thinking about, the first thing I thought about when we were talking about the trip to the moon was wondering how much of that was, listen, certainly Walt Disney was brilliant and a brilliant storyteller, but you wonder how much inspiration he got from many other places, not just here in this country, but around the world. And I wonder how much inspiration he took from Trip to the Moon for his rocket to the moon for Disneyland in 1955.
Well, are you accusing Walt Disney of plagiarism? You know, because Thompson and Dundee were originators. They actually created another ride, which was a submarine ride, where you went down into the submarine, you looked out the portals, you could see mermaids, and the submarine went under an ice cap.
I think that Walt Disney was smart enough to take inspiration from ideas and stories that would resonate and would work. And certainly their 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea attraction, I'm sure, was part of the inspiration for his idea to bring it over to Disneyland as well.
You're probably absolutely correct. You know, Walt had it. You know, Walt. People say Walt was such a great inventor, and no, he was really more of an innovator. And what innovation is you take something that's already existing and you look at it differently. You know, you reconfigure it with other parts, or you take a look at it from a different perspective. And so, you know, since these attractions were so popular in Luna Park, I'm sure that Walt took a look at that, and in the back of his memory, because Walt had this magnificent memory, he never forgot anything, and he thought, we could recreate this for a new generation with the new technology that we have. But getting back to the question, what's in the Luna Park pool from a classic Disney animated film?
Well, it goes back to the elephants that you were talking about. You can find the Dumbo tiles around the pool.
Yep, flying Dumbo. And Dumbo has absolutely nothing to do with Coney Island at all. So although one of the amusement parks actually had a attraction called the Flying Pigs, which you had these huge pigs and you got on, and they were on this rotating thing, so you'd be lifted up in the air and you'd spun around and go up and down and all. See, but Disney probably never heard of that one, but it worked through that. Now also out here, you see the Keister Coaster. And Keister, of course, is a slang term. It comes from a German word which means rump or rear end. And so for the 200 feet on that, you're going down on your rear end. And it's done up to look like a wooden roller coaster, which were very popular at Coney Island. Now, the one thing that people always talk about is that big clown face at the bottom that you come sailing through. And I know there are some people who don't like clowns. Can you believe that?
To some people, it's the big scary clown face.
Well, I'll have you know that
if you think that the chairs inside the lobby scared you, go take a look at the big clown face outside.
Well, I'll have you know that I used to be a clown. I worked at Six Flags Magic Mountain as a clown, Schlocko the Clown. So we can talk about that some other time.
You're creeping me out. I need to unremember that now.
And Ron Schneider worked there as Professor Spillikin, and then he left. And I came in, I didn't even know who Ron Schneider was, and I got to be the second Professor Spillikin at Six Flags Magic Mountain. But anyway, with clowns, there are several types. There's the white face, there's the Auguste, which has sort of a mixture of flesh tones and colors, and then there's the tramp clowns like Emmett Kelly and Red Skelton's Freddie the Freeloader, all of that. But whiteface is just really scary because they just seem so unreal to kids. And here we got this whiteface clown. Now, there were a lot of clowns at Coney Island because, again, that was a form of entertainment. And clowns were all three of those versions were very popular at the various amusement parks. At Steeplechase, they had what was called the Blowhole Theater. Now, I know your minds are probably creating all sorts of things, but one of the things we discussed about the Flip Flap Railway is they would charge people to see people on an attraction, whatever. They formed an area outside of an attraction that it looked like a wooden floor, but it had these vents in there that would blow up air, so women's dresses would blow up, and you could see their knickers and their ankles, for crying out loud, and all of this. And then to also increase the amusement, they would have a white-faced clown, and he would go up to you, and while you were taken by surprise and all of this, he had this paddle, and he would smack you on the rear end, and it would make a slapping sound. So it was called a slap stick, which is why the comedy in the 1920s films and all of that, silent films, were called slapstick. This is where it came from. And in the queue lines, talk about interactive queues, this is probably where Disney got the idea. They would sometimes have a clown or a guy with an electric cattle prod. And so if people were complaining about standing in line, I don't have my Magic Plus or whatever, they would take the cattle prod and they would look at the most tender area of your body and put it there, and you'd shout, and then everybody else would just be an amusement. And it just seemed to pass the time.
It was like next gen for the 20s. Like, that's how they made their cues.
So there's all of those clowns. And I was also telling Lou a little earlier, there's a Disney connection. One of the cartoon series that inspired Walt was called Out of the Inkwell by Max Fleischer and Dave Fleischer. Fleischers went on to do Betty Boop and Popeye cartoons and the Superman cartoons. But their first successful cartoon series was called Out of the Inkwell with Coco the Clown. So there'd be an ink bottle on the artist's desk, and an animated clown, Coco, would come out, and then he would interact in the live-action world and cause mischief. And Walt, of course, did a reversal of that. So when he did the Alice comedies, he took that idea but had a real live girl interacting in a cartoon world. Well, that little Coco the Clown was rotoscoped, which is another invention by the Fleischer brothers, where you film live action and then you put it on, you project it onto a cell and you trace it over, so you get very realistic human movement. Well, the person doing Coco the Clown was Dave Fleischer. And the reason he was doing the clown is because he worked at a clown in Coney Island. And according to family legend, he had Max come down and film him doing clowns. And that's where they got the idea of, doing this whole series. But none of that has anything to do at all. It's just because I love hearing the sound of my own voice. Nothing to do at all with the clown. That clown with that big, huge open mouth, you guys know where that comes from. It's that traditional Midway game attraction that was very popular, was introduced back then, is still popular today. I'm sure you've been to the Midway Carnival booth where they have several clown heads and they have an open mouth, and you're given a water gun. and you and the people next to you are shooting water into the clown's mouth to blow up the balloon on the top to see who can blow it up, and pop it to win the prize. There's a variation of that out on Disney's Boardwalk where it's the auto race, where you're pumping in water for the cars to go. So that's what the clown is doing there. That's why there's water in the clown's mouth.
I just can't get past the fact that now I look at you and I think of Pennywise from Stephen King's It. So,
listen, if I trotted out my entire past here, you would, you would go as pale as a China doll clown. Now we see a blue Ferris wheel over there in the kids area and all of that. The leaping horse libations here. It's done up like a carousel, and we see carousel horses along the top. But actually, the name of that and the big picture we see on the side, we see a woman on a horse, and they seem to be falling. This actually relates to an attraction that was at the Steel Pier at Atlantic City. Atlantic City had a steel pier which was right across from the boardwalk. It was about 1,000 feet long. And Doc Carver came up with the idea of a diving horse attraction. Supposedly he was on a horse going across a wooden bridge, and it started to partially collapse, and the horse dove into the water. And so Carver thinks, this is a great idea for entertainment. But it'd be even cuter if we had a cute girl in a bathing suit on top of the horse. And so that's what they did at the Steel Pier. In 1924, a teenager, Sonora Webster, got the job, and it was very popular. She ended up marrying Al Carver, and so she's Sonora Webster Carver. But in 1931, what happened, because horses don't dive off the thing like, yes, jackknife, swan dive, cannonball. No, basically what happens is the diving platform, and I've seen a diving horse act out in California at Pacific Ocean Park. Basically what happens is the platform sort of tips, so the horse is actually skidding down, and so 40 feet down into the tank. Well, in 1931, the mechanism jammed, the horse got skittish, it finally released, and so Sonora hit the water badly, and she detached both of her retinas, so she was blind, but she continued doing the diving horse act for years and years, and in fact it was the basis of the 1991 Disney movie Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken. So if you've never seen that film, now you can go out and do that and then rush to the boardwalk and take a look at that. And the other reference to that is actually on the boardwalk itself, which is where we're going to be heading, because when they built ESPN, I thought, oh my gosh, take a look at that building. It's modernistic. It really doesn't fit in with the theme of the 20s and the 30s on the boardwalk. And just recently, taking a closer look at it, and I heard from a friend, well, have you considered this, Jim? And so I did the research. The top of the ESPN building is done up like the diving tank that Sonora would go into. So those loops and all of that's not futuristic. All of that is part, and that's why you got flags up there too. It's part of the diving tank for Sonora. But what do you say, Lou? Let's head out to the boardwalk. How about that?
Sounds good. So, Jim, we've made it out to the boardwalk, one of my favorite places on property, as we're approaching one of my favorite times on property, which is dusk. And this is sort of the time where the boardwalk starts to become active. It really becomes alive at light. And we'll talk more about what this concept of the boardwalk was and how it really came to be. But I want to sort of segue from what we were just talking about to where we are. Because what we're going to do is sort of take a virtual trip. We're going to start over by ESPN and virtually walk around the boardwalk. But you were talking about Sonora Carter and how the ESPN club is built to look like that tank that she would have jumped into or fallen into, as the case may be, with her horse. But, as Disney is wont to do, they take an obscure name or an obscure reference like that, and they give them their credit. They pay homage to them in some different ways, and she is no exception. And a lot of people might not know where else here at the boardwalk they could find her name.
And that's right. Do you want to share that? Not only the vice presidential suite here at the boardwalk is named the Sonora Suite, and that's because of Sonora Carver. And the presidential suite is the Steeplechase suite. But, as we were walking out here to the boardwalk, we saw a sign on the side here. And, sometimes you don't need to know historical figures. Sometimes you don't need to know an Imagineer's name or a historical reference, because what name did we see, buddy?
So as you walk from the breezeway, from the Luna Park pool out to the boardwalk area, past the arcade and by the Wyland Galleries, you'll see a directory sign there. And the Disney Vacation Club Villas over at the Boardwalk Villas, like all the DVC resorts, has a community hall where you can go to watch movies or rent or play games or whatever it may be. And if you look carefully, and it's like another name we'll find here on the boardwalk in a little while, it's a name that if you sort of just look at it and read it word for word, it doesn't make any sense. But when you say it out loud, Ferris Wheel, you see that the name is actually making reference to the Ferris wheel ride.
Actually, it's Ferris W. Ehlers. So it's Ferris Wheelers, but you're close there. And I know one of your favorites, of course, is the proprietor of the Boardwalk Bakery. And what is his name?
Again, it's where if you look at the proprietor's name, you might think it's like an Osh Popham. It's like a real name or has a reference, but it's Hugh G. Croissant. And if you say it out loud, if you say it quickly, it's Huge Croissant, which you can actually find inside the Boardwalk Bakery.
Absolutely. And so that's fun. And I think that's wonderful that the Imagineers, and they do this at the parks too, they put in all of these references, but they put in references that even if you have no background whatsoever, you can enjoy, like the dentist's office at Disney Hollywood Studios and the talent office over there too. So, saying the names out loud, it's fun. It's something that, again, if you don't notice it, it doesn't impact your experience. But if you do know it, it does enhance it. Now,
the thing I like about, as long as we're talking about Hugh or Mr. Croissant, as I like to call him, the thing that always fascinates me about a name like that is that they don't just put a name there that's a play on words, but they create an elaborate backstory for him, right? And you were talking about sort of the dentist and the confectionery and all those. And there is no great big book of Imagineering. There is no place that people can find them. But they create these elaborate backstories, as they did for Huge Croissant and the Pie Stretcher and everything else, that you can't really find anywhere. And so I always found it interesting that they create them, but there really is no place to sort of get the story out other than maybe Jim Korkis and The Vault of Walt, available at Amazon.com.
I know, and that's part of the sadness. Do we have time for me to go off on a tangent for 2 minutes, 3 minutes here?
Listen, we went down the whole scary clown path, so we might as well go down another one.
Okay, because these are two stories about Old Key West that I just confirmed this week. And you think Old Key West, okay, that's the fictional Conch Flats, and it's designed, it was the first Disney Vacation Club. It's designed like, the Florida Keys and all of that. Okay. Lou, maybe you know the answer to this. Why is it called Olivia's Cafe, and what is it about that restaurant that is unique compared to any other restaurant on Disney property?
The shrimp and grits and the oh my god, I can't remember the name of the burger that comes in a rectangle. It probably has nothing to do with food or the fact that they have pictures of all the DVC members outside.
None whatsoever, unfortunately. Although I do like the food there, especially at lunch. Never been there for breakfast or dinner, but for lunch.
Conch fritters with the little. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, we'll go through that. Well, we were also talking about Miller's Ale House out here off of Disney property has funnel fries now, funnel cake fries. So anyway, here's two Olivia stories. You don't see them in print anywhere else. How wonderful this is. It used to be part of the training for the cast members. Olivia's Cafe. This is Olivia's house, and she was a great cook. People said that she needed to open up her own kitchen. She didn't have enough money. And she said, but I'll open up my own kitchen instead of a restaurant. But I've got this huge table, but I don't have enough chairs or silverware or plates. So people who come will have to bring their own. So next time you're at Olivia's Cafe, take a look. The chairs are all different. The silverware is different. The plates are different. You even have plates hanging up around on the wall there for regulars to come back and grab their plates so they can have that. Outside is the Gurgling Suitcase a bar. Any idea why it's called that? It does relate to what we're going to be talking about Coney Island and Atlantic City. No clue? Okay, what happened is during Prohibition, people would go down to the Keys to get alcohol. They would put them in their suitcase to smuggle.
During Prohibition, they still do it now in 2013.
Yeah, there you go. And then they put them in their suitcase. They're smuggling them back up. So custom officials, law officials would grab a suitcase and shake it to see if it gurgled. So you could hear the liquid. So that's where the gurgling suitcase bar. So anyway, that's another example of, yes, there's these wonderful, rich stories, but, I'm sure there are people who worked at Disney for years, even at Olivia's, and have no idea about any of that at all. But
because I think it's one of those things that unless you know that there's a backstory, how or why would a guest be prompted to ask, what's the story of Olivia's? What's the story of the bakery? What's the story of the confectionery?
Well, actually, people go, what's that story? Let me go to WDW Radio and pull up these podcasts. Well, let's talk about the Boardwalk. The very first Boardwalk, of course, was at Atlantic City, and it was about 8 feet wide and about a mile long. And eventually it became so popular it became 60 feet wide and 6 miles long. Now, the Disney Boardwalk is 35 feet wide and 1,300 feet long. You should be taking notes for that test. Again, the whole concept of a boardwalk was, by golly, we don't want them, dragging sand, from the beach into the hotels, into the stores, whatever. But also, some people came to the beach and they didn't want to go out on the beach. The beach was filthy, and they're in these long dresses and all of this. And sometimes invalids would go there to recuperate. So they would use the boardwalk. And again, some of the invalids would want to get around. And so some smart guy got a bunch of old wooden wheelchairs. And so would have rolling chairs, rolling people up and down the boardwalk. And in the 1920s, they had over 3,000 rolling chairs. My understanding is they're starting to bring back rolling chairs into the boardwalk. Here at Disney, we have the Surrey bikes instead, taking their place. And if you haven't done that, that's a wonderful trip. Have you done that with your family, go around?
So the Surrey bikes are wonderful, right? And they're really not like the roll. Listen, I remember being at Atlantic City in the 80s, and they had sort of these wicker rolling chairs, which obviously over time, they weren't rolling wheelchairs. They looked less medical and more formal, more relaxing, and they had padding in them, and they had covers on them. And it was a nice way to sort of get from one end of the boardwalk to another. They went away. It's good to hear that maybe they're coming back now, especially now as a Jersey store continues to try and rebuild. These are sort of more like the quadricycles, which are a lot of fun. You can get a single bench or a double bench. You can rent them on a half hour. I think it's $20 or $22 per half hour. And it's a beautiful way to wander the promenade. It goes completely around, past the Swan and Dolphin, past the Yacht and Beach Club. It's a wonderful ride because as you see in front of us now, Jim, it's primarily flat until you get to the Epcot Hill of Death, right? So if you think the little kids are going to be able to pull their weight, that's a much steeper. It's great going down. Going up, despite which way you may go, is a little bit harder, but you have to kind of work for the hill.
Now, do you get out and push or... No?
I don't even pedal. I'm just
okay. And no wonder those kids are going crazy. And do you think it would take... And I've never gone on these bike Surreys, but do you think it would take about a half hour to go around, or should people factor in more time than that?
I think you could do it in a half hour, especially if you do the hill first. I would get out of the way first.
It's all downhill from there is basically what you're saying. Okay. So again, we have the boardwalk out here, and again, for your test, by the way, there are 300,000 screws in the herringbone wood pattern out here, and the wood has been chemically treated, to prevent weathering and all of this. So this is going to last for quite a long time. So we've already talked about ESPN down there, and we've talked about the Boardwalk Bakery. I have no clue how Cuisina's fits in with the 20s and 30s and the boardwalk. I don't know if I even know how Spoodles fit in with that.
It's Spoodles. So how I was able to justify Spoodles was that Mediterranean inspired food. It was known as Cuisine of the Sun. right? So I figured, okay, the sun, the boardwalk, the shore, it's a stretch, but you make it work because they had awesome appetizers there. So, and I dug Spoodles a lot. I love Cuisine as well, too. That opened back in August of 2009, obviously Iron Chef, Cat Cora. Still that Mediterranean-inspired with a little bit of Greek roots and Mississippi upbringing. So you got the lamb. It's awesome. A lot of nice Greek comfort food in there. Again, I keep going back to the food as well. So I understand where they sort of had the sun-inspired cuisine, maybe a little bit of a stretch for Cuisina, but I dig the food anyway.
I never realized that WDW Radio had changed into a food blog.
It's just I use the Disney stuff as sort of my gateway into just to get to talk about food.
You know, I was hoping for a funnel cake. You know, my first funnel cake was at Knott's Berry Farm out in California, and then fortunately they started to have them at fairs and carnivals, things like that. Well, let's go to something we do know, which is Seashore Sweets. Seashore Sweets.
Which I think has probably the most direct connection, especially to Atlantic City, not just because of the taffy and the candy, but because of what you can find inside.
Do you want to talk about saltwater taffy?
I love saltwater. We could talk about how saltwater taffy it was a mistake. Mm-hmm. Saltwater taffy was a mistake. When a storm hit, a lot of the taffy had been it had gotten wet from the sea air and the sea water,
and the doors of the candy store had flown open, and so some of that mist and all of that had got in there. Yes.
And a little girl, as legend goes, a little girl comes in the next day and asks for a piece of taffy, and he says, "Well, all we have," and he's saying half jokingly, "is saltwater taffy. We don't have regular," because it wasn't called saltwater taffy; it was just regular taffy. All we have is saltwater taffy. She bought it. She left. She must have told her friends, because the next day everybody else came in asking for saltwater taffy, and hence the rest is history.
And that store owner was David Bradley, and it was in 1883. And you will confirm that I am doing this without notes, right? Not even on my hand here, right? Okay. And so yeah, he was just being a smart aleck, and she being gullible went, "Oh, okay, we'll have that." There is no salt water in saltwater taffy to this day, but there is saltwater taffy sold in Seashore Sweets, but it's got Goofy's picture on it. It's in those prepackaged bags there. Well, the storyline there, outside you see two sweet young ladies. Those were sisters who came to compete in the Miss America contest, and when neither of them won, they just decided to stay because they liked the area so much, and they opened up their own shop. And of course, the Miss America contest started in Atlantic City, 1921. It was there for about 85 years. 2007 moved to Las Vegas, and inside you'll see a lot of references to Miss America, right?
Right, so around the entire top where the walls meet the ceiling, you can find pictures of all the Miss America winners going back to that very first Miss America pageant from 1921
to 2007.
All the way up to 2007, including the Miss America winner, Leanza Cornett, who is...
of course, she was the first cast member to she was Miss America in 1993, by the way. She was the first cast member in 1991 to assist in the portrayal of Ariel in Voyage of the Little Mermaid. And Leanza then went on to a career as a television host and personality. And Lou is sort of testing you there, because when he says all the Miss America winners, he's absolutely correct, except there's a couple of speed bumps. You'll notice that there are no photos from 1928 to 1932. That's because there was no Miss America contest held that year. And you'll notice that there is one winner, her last name's Campbell, 22 to 23. She is the only person to win Miss America twice, and so she is up there. And
she's like the Grover Cleveland of the Miss America.
I don't know if I would describe her that way. I don't know if it's gentlemanly to describe her that way. And of course, for the Miss America contest, it was a promotion again to sort of extend the summer. For people to stay at the Atlantic City Boardwalk longer. A very, very successful promotion. In fact, as you go in right to the right-hand side in a plexiglass case is an actual robe and tiara and scepter, and there are framed souvenir programs and tickets. And as I was pointing out to Lou, people always say, well, Jim, how can I start to be a Disney historian? And one of the ways is you've got to take a look, because over there heading towards the restrooms, there's a little plaque on the wall that lists the dozen institutions and people who donated items for that. And I will bet that if you search the internet, you won't find a picture of that plaque anywhere, because I looked, and maybe you're better than I am. Yes, you are better than I am. You won't find it. And for Miss America, of course, they had the swimsuit competition, which was called the Bathers Review. And then they had the rolling chair parade, where they'd put them in the rolling chairs and they'd roll them on the boardwalk. And it made me think, WDW Radio does all these Disney cruises. How come there's no swimsuit competition for Miss WDW Radio? You have the different, levels, so 10 and under, and 11 to 17, whatever. And I think you should also have men. And I think for men there should be a category that I know I would win. Most looking alike Monstro the whale in a bathing suit. So I think you guys should push Lou for a Miss WDW radio, and there could be a talent competition and a swimsuit. Well, Lou doesn't seem very excited about that.
We have a lot of surprises planned for our trip in the fantasy this year.
Well, that's why it's called a fantasy, isn't it? Okay, so we should go on further. We should go to.
Wait. So here's your trick
Yes?
question.
Okay.
In 1922.
Yes.
What celebrity was a judge of the then it was the Atlantic City pageant that next year it was the Miss America pageant? Who was a celebrity judge?
Oh, well, that's obvious. It's Bob Barker, right? he was around from the beginning.
Like Dick Clark, I think, was around back then. Norman Rockwell.
No, did not know that. I wonder if he ever painted a Miss America portrait. Norman Rockwell was a good friend of Walt Disney too. So another Disney connection, all sorts of dotted connections. And so the next stop on our trip is going to be Flying Fish Cafe. Anything you have to say about the food, Lou?
I can and will do a full review of Flying Fish Cafe. One of the best meals I've ever had anywhere, ever. Not just in Walt Disney World. We need to go.
Anywhere in the whole wide world? Oh my gosh! See, now I'm just fascinated by it because of again its connection. It references a roller coaster at Coney Island called Flying Turns, and one of the ride vehicles was called the Flying Fish. Just like we have ride vehicles on Snow White that were named after the dwarves, and on Mr. Toad that were named. Oh, wait a minute. For those kids growing up in Florida, that makes no sense to you at all. But those of you out in Disneyland, I hope you're enjoying those rides. Okay, so Flying Fish was the name of one of the ride vehicles. When you go in, you'll see that the backs of the booths curve up and down, so it's like a roller coaster in the back. They have a lighted Ferris wheel. You have the Flying Fish actually there. They're in pairs on a parachute ride where people would get married. Did your folks ever tell you about the parachute ride?
My parents grew up in New York. They grew up in Brooklyn. Coney Island was where they hung out. They took me there when I was a kid as well too, and they reminisced ad nauseum about the steeplechase. They talked about the parachute rides, which now we don't really see those kind of things anymore. But when you go in and you see what looks to be columns, if you pay close attention, you see that those fish are hanging from those same type of parachute rides that my parents talked about. The images on the wall are probably would very much be a sense of nostalgia for them, because that is what Coney Island looked like to them back in the 40s.
And that mural really does reference steeplechase. In fact, they have the steeplechase ride, and it's wooden horses, Bruce. They painted in wooden horses. They're there for that. So a wonderful place. I have never eaten in the Flying Fish Cafe. Lou looked at me askance, but that's true. But as we walk out further, we're at Promenade Pier. And this is one of those stories of a Disney World that never was. You know the story behind this, Lou?
So, Crescent Lake, believe it or not, in this whole area, Jim, there are so many the boardwalk could have looked like a much different kind of place, not just what was on the boardwalk, but what would have been maybe out in the water as well. Because the idea of the boardwalk, and not just the carnival games that we see a little bit farther down, but some of the rides, those classic rides, that the imagery that I think would very much sort of complete the picture of what the boardwalk was going to be, was supposed to be here as well. It was supposed to have that lighted Ferris wheel and this midway of games as well too.
Yes, absolutely. So Promenade Pier would have extended out into Crescent Lake. You would have the Ferris wheel out there, and I can hear Disney Legal in their cubicles turning over in their cubicles right now. You're going to put people on a Ferris wheel out in the middle of a lake, and how do you get them off? And, do you realize the liability? And also right down by ESPN, right over towards where there's the sort of where the wedding pavilion type area is out there now, there was going to be a full-size carousel as well, and I'm sorry they didn't go with that. And you notice too, sometimes we can tell the difference between yacht and beach as we're looking right now, because we can see the color. One is blue and one is sort of grayish. You can see the difference between the inn and the villas. So if you look over at the inside, and this is the regular people, the non-Disney Vacation Club members, and so it's sort of dull and unhappy. And then over here on the villas side, where you have the Disney Vacation Club members, you've got these beautiful solid colors. You got the pinks, and you got the blues and the yellows, and isn't it exciting? It's the best kept secret that in living color, you should be over on this side. We talked about Thimble and Threads at F. Thompson, who's the proprietor there. One of the secrets that a lot of people don't understand is on the top of the one building, they have Crest O' the Wave. And do you know the story behind that, Lou? Would you like to share that? Okay. Well, it's because we're sitting in the wrong place. Because, again, Crest O' the Wave isn't a reference to Coney Island or Atlantic City, other than, there's waves out there. And it's certainly not a shop or a building or whatever. We're standing in the wrong place. If we were standing over by the Yacht and Beach Club, we were looking over at the boardwalk, one of the things we would see is the swans from the Swan floating in air. However, with the waves, now it looks like the swans are floating on top of the waves.
And there is the Jim Korkis aha moment of the day, right? It's like the Morocco Pavilion and the colors of Tower of Terror, everything having to match up. I never realized that it was all about the visual, the sight lines.
See, and there are people who work here at the Boardwalk who don't know that as well. And, and the only reason I know that is because I worked for Kay Bundy and Disney Adult Discoveries, and one of the things that we were planning on working on was a walking tour of some of the Disney resorts, and so we were checking things out, and we checked with the Imagineers, and that doesn't seem to fit in. What's all that about? And so that's where that came out, and that's one of the reasons I love being on your show is sharing this with your listeners, because it keeps the story alive, and I just imagine the happiness they have sharing it with their family and friends, so that their family and friends look at them like, my gosh, what an excellent... You're a genius. You're a genius. Disney should be hiring you right now, And so this will probably be popping up in guidebooks now and all of this. And it all started here on WDW Radio. Now, right next to that, of course, is Jelly Rolls. And a dueling piano bar. A lot of fun. When I first came out to Florida, they had Howl at the Moon in Church Street Station. And, of course, Eisner saw that and how popular that was. And he says, well, we don't want people going to Church Street Station in downtown Orlando to see that. We're going to do something here. So, Jelly Rolls. Any idea where the name comes from?
Jelly Roll Morton.
Absolutely.
The self-proclaimed, because I'm not going to say he's the inventor of jazz, because he is the listen, good for him for promoting himself as the inventor of jazz. I invented the question mark, like Austin Powers. But yeah, he proclaimed himself the inventor of jazz. He was a ragtime and jazz pianist and a composer, and he gave himself that moniker, much to the dismay of those other people who may have actually invented jazz.
Well, and again, that's one of those things that, how do you figure who was the first and all of that? And Jelly Roll Morton, of course, wasn't even his real name. It was like Frederick Mothe, Mothe, whatever. But the very first jazz composition that he did, and it was published, and again, it was the first jazz composition published. That's why, he's using that as a springboard. See, I invented this. I'm the first one to write it down. Was called Jelly Roll Blues. And again, he was described by his contemporaries as having a bumptious persona, which basically means that, like Lou and I, a smart aleck and fun-loving and all of that. So again, what a great place to name a place that has dueling pianos, because jazz, of course, is improvisation. You're constantly having to jump in and do this. And it's important that he wrote down Jelly Roll Blues, because jazz, just like oral tradition, that's how it was passed to musicians. Most musicians couldn't read music. They would hear a song and then they would play it, but sometimes they would play it with variations. They would speed up a part or slow down a part or add in a section or leave out a section. So jazz was very improvisational. And so to have a dueling piano place where you're going to improv and you're going to have a bumptious persona from the piano players, I think that's really neat. And then right across, of course, is the Atlantic Dance Hall. And in the 20s and 30s, dance marathons, very, very important, especially when the Depression hit. Because you could earn money by being the last person dancing on the floor. And so sometimes these would go on for weeks or even a month or more. And you're saying, well, were people just so desperate that they did it just for that one prize? Well, most of these contests were rigged, by the way. It was sort of like, I won't say there are any reality shows on TV now that are rigged, but basically they could see people were paying a quarter to come in and see. There were some people that there were the favorites, and so sometimes you'd negotiate things, so that the favorite would win. But you'd get in the marathon thing because you got 3 meals a day. However, you had to eat it while you were dancing. So you wore a little tray around your neck or a tray around your partner's neck, and you were eating, or you would write letters or things like this while you were dancing. And you had a roof over your head because every so often you would be given a little break so that a doctor could look at you and there would be a cot. And for another quarter, you could go and you could watch these people trying to sleep. How amazing is it? See, Disney is missing a huge bet here on this. Tell people they can win a special Disney pin if they're the last person standing, dragging their partner around the room there. But that's how that fits in with the Coney Island experience. And of course, we jump through something that Lou referenced, which is it's called, believe it or not, Wildwood Landing. That's the official name, and that's where the 4 midway games are, where you do the water gun with the car race and the hoop toss and the hidden innocent Cupid doll and all of that. And I will tell you from past experience, these games here at least are legitimate. You talked about my storied past here. I did work briefly as a barker at a carnival, and also worked the midway games at Six Flags Magic Mountain for a while. And as part of your training, you're shown how these are rigged. So a basketball hoop isn't round, it's an oval, so you can't get in. Over here it is round, but it's smaller than regulation size, so you have to hit it right in the center. There's no, ifs, ands, or buts.
You have a legitimate chance to win here.
You have a legitimate chance to win here, but isn't it interesting? You're not winning Disney plush. You're winning, a typical Carney game stuffed toy. And as you realize, there are no stuffed Mickey Mouses anywhere on Walt Disney World property. None whatsoever. You cannot go into any store and get a stuffed Mickey Mouse. You understand that, right?
It's a plush.
It's a plush. Because, again, if it's stuffed, it means it was taxidermied. It was dead and it was taxidermied. So that's the power of Disney words. Now, Lou, did you ever walk on the Atlantic City Boardwalk or the Coney Island Boardwalk?
I did. As a kid, my parents took me to Coney Island, and I have very fond memories of Nathan's hot dogs. Again, bring it back to food. But I did spend a lot of time. As a kid, my parents would go to Atlantic City a lot. We would spend a weekend there, spend the day on the beach, walking on the boardwalk, at night in the casino. I mean, I wouldn't be in the casinos, but my parents would be in the casinos, gambling away my college tuition or earning my college tuition, however it may be. But yeah, and that's why I said, for me, Jim, and I think for a lot of people who grew up in that area or visited Atlantic City back then, you can very much get a sense of that same type of feel, a lot of the inspiration, even just through the herringbone pattern of the boardwalk.
You know, and again, you're very observant, because that was Stern's. We talked about it in show 310, that Stern's thrust is interpretation. So he's not looking for historical accuracy, historically exact, more or less. What he's looking at is to create sort of a cinematic staging. You know, so you get that romanticized feeling about the boardwalk. You know, and Nathan's, that's that very funny story, because of course he worked for Feltman's, and he opened up his own thing, and he was selling them for 5 cents instead of 10 cents. And so Feltman said, well, you don't want to get Frankfurters from him. The reason he can sell those so cheaply is, you notice you don't see any dogs on the boardwalk here, which is one of the ways that it became known as a hot dog. And so Nathan tried to win over the public by, yes, if you bought a Frankfurter, you could get a free root beer or free beer, okay? And that still didn't bring people in. So what he did, very clever, is he went to nearby doctor offices and he said, you can come to my stand and eat as much as you want for free, as long as you're wearing your white coat and all of this. And so as soon as people saw doctors eating at Nathan's, there they go. and again, his fame came not from the Frankfurters themselves, but because in those days they didn't make hot dog buns. You got a roll and you had to slice it in half, and he was famous for, you know, boom, 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 boom. You know, and I think, you know, they should have hot dogs out here. I think they should have a hot dog eating contest out here. You know, I think they should have a swimsuit contest out here. You know, I think they should have rum runners come out here, Streetmosphere, come out here, and they bring in the barrels, but of course it can't be beer because this is Disney, so it's root beer, you know, and you know, have the Prohibition cops, you know, running after them. What Iger never phones me up to ask any of these things.
Right, but I like the idea of imagining the boardwalk, right? Imagining the boardwalk, how differently it could be. I want to go back to something we talked about quickly, and you talked about Streetmosphere performers at night. That's when the boardwalk comes alive, right? There are street performers, there's magicians, there's balloon artists, there's music. It really comes alive here, and it's one of my favorite places just to wander. I think it's a hidden treasure. It's overlooked. I did an entire show, which I'll link to in the show notes, about the boardwalk. But sort of this idea of what else the boardwalk could have been, and maybe what it should have been. Because back in 1991, as part of Eisner's Disney Decade, we talked about the plans for the Ferris wheel and the merry-go-round. Well, there were other plans as well, too. And Disney Publicity had sort of put out a release saying you were not only going to have those things, but one of the other places we talked about above Jelly Rolls, one of my favorite places, is Walt's Attic.
Yes.
That was actually supposed to be a restaurant. And there was also going to be 2 theaters out here, too. There was going to be a 900-seat theater that was going to have a show based on the song Under the Sea with The Little Mermaid. And there was going to be a second, smaller theater with about 300 seats as well, too. This was really going to be not just a dining and shopping, but an entertainment venue as well, too.
And you know, they when some of those ideas started to go south, they thought about converting the attic into a small theater. They were going to do briefly, and again with Disney, as I tell people, everything Disney does is written in Jello. It can be firm one moment and another second gone. A show called Walt's Attic, which is why you've got all those wonderful antiques up there, and it would be a show sort of like Top of the World and all of that, but it would go through Walt's life in the 20s and 30s. and capturing some of those high point milestones. And you know what's amazing to me is the only way to get to the attic, and I've done presentations in there, it's just absolutely beautiful, is you got to walk all the way down. There is no outside access at all. And so that's one of my what were you thinking moments.
Well, I get it, because it's meant to be now for the exclusive use of the Disney Vacation Club members. And by not having an outside entrance that anybody could walk up, I think that's what it does. And I think that's what adds to the charm, is that there's usually nobody ever in there. If you want to go and sort of spend a relaxing vacation with a book or just sitting out on a beautiful view of Crescent Lake, Walt's Attic is the place to go.
Right, and they wouldn't let us in there. I know they wouldn't let us in there. I didn't even ask for them to let us in there. But yes, there's just as there were in the lobby and all that, there's authentic antiques in there, artifacts. There's wicker chairs. There's those love chairs, love seats that spin around and all that. It's a very, very nice place. No, but I was worried, from a safety standpoint, if fire breaks out, you're running all the way down, the screaming and on flames, Well, hopefully that would never happen, but...
I know that, put it this way, I know that there's a way out. Yeah. There's not necessarily a way in. How's that? Yeah. But I want to finish off our tour of the Boardwalk Promenade with something else that was supposed to be that I'm sure most people probably never heard of, and they're probably going to think we're making it up.
Okay.
Because in 1992, something else was planned, not necessarily for the Boardwalk, but for the enjoyment of the Boardwalk guests, the Yacht and Beach Club guests, the Swan and Dolphin guests. Look, just as the monorail resorts, the Contemporary, the Polynesian, and the Grand Floridian, have the electrical water pageant every night, they thought about putting something out here as well, too. And atop floating barges with lots of neon, and a story that was to be written by Andrew Lloyd Webber, right, was a show called Noah's Ark.
You're making this up. You're making this up. How can you possibly make these things up? Do you speak to your mother with that same tone of voice? No, you're absolutely right. And this was going to be huge. And many times Disney has considered water shows, again, because of the success of the electrical water pageant. At Pleasure Island, there was going to be a light show, fireworks show, music show out on Pleasure Island, where basically this ghost steam wheeler from Merriweather Pleasure had sunk because fireworks were being carried in there and they blew up and the whole bit, and it would go through that. But yeah, Noah's Ark, and Andrew Lloyd Webber, he did write the score. It wasn't like, hey, Andy, if you have a few minutes, would you give us a couple of ideas? No,
and when we say Noah's Ark, we mean the biblical reference to Noah's Ark. And Andrew Lloyd Webber actually was a good choice. He had written Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. He had written Jesus Christ Superstar. So, yeah, there was going to be a Bible-inspired water show right in the middle of Crescent Lake.
Yes, amazing, isn't it? Amazing. And it came very, very close. And I really don't have any idea, other than the typical Disney reasons of, finance or whatever, why that dead ended.
The legend that I had heard, as it was that Don France, who was the producer and director of SpectroMagic, he was in charge of the development. They built storyboards. They had models. This plane was in flight. If the legend is true, I was not there. What I had heard was that Michael Eisner had gone to an equestrian show, was incredibly impressed at the pageantry and the majesty, and came back and said, you know what, I changed my mind. We're going to go from Noah's Ark and we're going to do an equestrian show called EQ. It was going to be a nighttime horse-themed, don't look at me like that, it was going to be a nighttime horse-themed show. And then, from what I understand, they felt that this was a little bit maybe too much like Arabian Nights, which is out over on 192, sort of that horse-themed, sort of Arabian Nights style show. They had taken that idea of Noah's Ark and they said, maybe we'll bring it over. Why don't we do this? Why don't we take it to MGM Studios? We could have it there. It'll be just like Fantasmic out in Disneyland. And they said, well, wait a minute. If we have Fantasmic, why don't we just bring, it's a lot cheaper. Let us just bring Fantasmic out here from Disneyland. And that eventually led to the demise of what I think could have been a very interesting Noah's Ark show here. The Disney World that could have been Noah's Ark, Ferris wheels, carousels, Walt's Attic Restaurant here on the boardwalk.
And maybe that's a springboard for another podcast, the Walt Disney World that never was. Now, I hadn't heard about EQ. It doesn't surprise me, because Michael Eisner was the type of guy who could churn out idea after idea after idea after idea, and again, very emotionally inspired. I had heard through my sources, though, that yes, Noah's Ark had been considered to be moved because so much work had been done, and you've got all of that money invested. How do you recover those costs? And yeah, they were thinking that was going to go in for Fantasmic, and in some ways I wish it had, because that would have been a unique experience. And I'm still sort of sad that Pocahontas was coming out when they built Fantasmic, because it's so Pocahontas themed with that mountain and all of that, and I think there's so much more they can do. And I love Fantasmic out here, but boy, nothing beats seeing, the Mark Twain come around the rivers of America, and you've got all of the and you see the Columbia as Captain Hook's ship and all of that. It is just so cool.
Well, like you always say, it's written in Jello. You never know if and when Fantasmic may change, when the scenes may change, and the story may change, and what may come out to that theater out there.
And but getting back to the boardwalk. You don't have to stay here. You don't have to sell one of your family members in order to, come here. That's one of the wonderful things about Disney, and the wonderful things about the Disney resorts is you can just come. And you can come and you can appreciate some of those things that we shared about the interior. You can experience some of the things that we shared about the exterior. And again, as Lou pointed out, the outside boardwalk in the day is different than the outside boardwalk at night. And as we sit here, we're seeing the little lights start to come on, and you can even sense coming across Crescent Lake that feel that it's going to be a different place, a different experience.
Boardwalk Bakery in the morning for breakfast, coffee and a huge croissant for breakfast, flying fish, strolling the promenade with your family or the one that you love at night and enjoying the entertainment. You're right, you don't need to stay here to enjoy all that the boardwalk has to offer, nor do you actually have to be sitting next to Jim Korkis to enjoy all Jim Korkis has to offer, because as you hopefully know, he's not only the author of the wildly popular revised Vault of Walt with all new stories in it, but the all-new book, Who's Afraid of Song of the South? Jim, I'm going to put the links in the show notes to where people can and should purchase both those books. Put it on your shelf, put it on your Kindle or your iPad, wherever it may be, filled with more fascinating stories. And I have to have you come back, not just so we could eat at Flying Fish, but so you could share more of these stories, more of the aha moments.
Thank you very kindly to promote my books, Lou, and thanks to all of you who listen and who take a moment and come up and say, Jim, thank you for sharing this information, and again, please share these stories with others. Enjoy it. Disney there really is a Disney difference. It's a magical place,
and give Jim credit.
And the magic is not just in the parks themselves. It's throughout the entire area. So thank you again for the opportunity, Lou. I'm looking forward to doing this again with you sometime.
I'm looking forward to the funnel cake.
It's time for our Walt Disney World Trivia Question of the Week, where I ask you to test your knowledge of Walt Disney World trivia, history. Maybe I'll play a random sound clip or quote a line from an attraction or show, ask you to identify where in Walt Disney World you may have heard that clip. I'll then select one winner randomly from all the correct entries to win a Disney prize package. Before we get to this week's question, let's go back, review last week's question, and select our winner. So on our last show, we were talking about Valentine's Day, as romance was in the air at Walt Disney World as part of limited time magic. So your question was simple. In what Walt Disney World attraction is Valentine's Day being celebrated all year long? I want to once again thank the hundreds of you that answered this one and answered it correctly, because you all knew that the correct response was Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress. And you all knew that in that first scene, the father says to the audience, well, it looks like the Robins are getting ready to celebrate Valentine's Day today. What year is it? Oh, right around the turn of the century, and things couldn't be any better than they are today. Congratulations and thanks again to everybody who entered. You were playing for all of my audio walking tours of Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom, a WDW Radio luggage tag, button, and a signed copy of my Walt Disney World Trivia Book, Volume 2. And last week's winner is Jack Brooks. So Jack, congratulations. I'll get your package out to you right away. If you played last week and didn't win, thank you so much for playing, but don't worry because here's your next chance to enter in this week's Walt Disney World Trivia Challenge. And so once again this week, I want to ask you a question that may not test your knowledge of Walt Disney World history, because maybe you're a relative newcomer to the parks, but how much you pay attention to what you see, or maybe what you hear, or even the attractions that you visit. So your question this week is once again simple. Where in the world, in the Walt Disney World, can you find Guano Joe? That's it. Where in the world can you find Guano Joe? You have until Sunday, March 3rd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern to email your answer to contest@wdwradio.com. You'll once again be playing for all the audio tours, a luggage tag, button, a signed copy of the Walt Disney World Trivia Book Volume 2, and I'll even throw in a WDW Radio mystery ticket. If you want to check the blog and past shows, find out what that ticket could be used for and what you may win with it, you'll find out why you want to hang on to that as well. So good luck and have fun. That's going to do it for this week's show. Thanks again for taking the time and tuning in this and every week. Don't forget, in addition to the podcast, which you can subscribe to and rate and review on iTunes, don't forget about our weekly live video broadcast and interactive chat every Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, over at WDW Radio Live. Every Wednesday at 7:30, we do the WDW Newscast, where you can talk about and be part of the conversation as we discuss this week's Walt Disney World news. And if you can't catch it live, I'll post it on the blog, in the iTunes feed, and on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/WDW Radio. Also, be sure and visit the website for our daily blog posts, contests, photos, videos, and much more. You can also sign up for our free email newsletter and get daily updates delivered right to your inbox. There, you can also download the new free WDW Radio app for your iPhone and Android devices. You can connect with and talk with other Disney fans in our discussion forums and connect with me on Twitter. I'm at Lou Mangello and Facebook.com/WDW Radio. Also, be sure and check out the events page. Lots of events coming up, including the next meet of the month in Walt Disney World. It's going to be Sunday, March 24th in downtown Disney. And I'm happy to announce another new event that we have not announced previously, WDW Radio at the Movies. And on Sunday, March 24th, you can join us for an exclusive private screening of Disney's brand new Oz, Great and Powerful at the AMC Downtown Disney Theaters. More than just having the theater to ourselves, the WDW Radio family, everybody is going to get not just a ticket to Oz, Great and Powerful, but 2 vouchers, one for a popcorn and a soda. And before the show, Jim Korkis and I are going to discuss the Disney and Oz connection and history, and what else might have been in front of you, the live audience on stage. Maybe have some time for some Q&A as well. Everybody's also going to we're also going to have a raffle for prizes, books, and more. Everybody who attends is going to get a free WDW Radio event passport, an exclusive stamp just for that event. Everybody's also going to get a mystery ticket, and we're also going to have a post-movie gathering. I'll have some details with that coming soon, and of course, maybe a surprise or two. Tickets are just $20 per person and are limited. They are available on the events page over at WDWRadio.com starting Wednesday, February 27th at 12 o'clock Eastern. Again, that's for a Sunday, March 24th afternoon showing of Oz the Great and Powerful just for us, the WDW Radio family at the AMC Theaters in downtown Disney. Be sure and visit the events page for more information and to get tickets, as well as our other events, including this summer we'll be out to Aulani, July 15th through the 20th, and there are still tickets available for our trip to the Walt Disney Family Museum on Saturday, April 13th in San Francisco. Really excited about that. Early entry, special presentation, gift bags, surprises, and more, and many many more events, including our trip on the Disney Fantasy November 2nd through the 9th, 7 days in the Fantasy with our very special guest, author Ridley Pearson of the Kingdom Keepers and Peter of the Starcatcher series of books. A lot of fun to be had there as well. Find it all over at the event page over at WDWradio.com. Quick thanks to my partners and sponsors, Mouse Fan Travel. They are my official and recommended travel provider because it's who I use. So whether you're coming to Disney World, Land, Cruise Line, Adventures by Disney, or anywhere, Becky Menken and her team of agents give you the best possible prices, all available discounts, incredible personal service, and all at no additional cost to you. Visit them over at mousefantravel.com. When you're coming down to Disney World, maybe you want to stay in something a little bit larger, bring in the extended family. AllStarVacationHomes.com has more than 150 homes within just a couple of miles of Walt Disney World. And if you need to get a little bit of Disney magic delivered right to your door or your iPad or your Kindle device, Celebrations Magazine. You can subscribe, order back issues, and find out more over at celebrationspress.com. And as always, my friends, and you are my friends whether we have met yet or not, all I ask is that if you like the show, please help spread the word. Let others know about it. Tweet out that you're listening. Share links on Facebook. Tell your friends. And please come by, rate and review the show over on iTunes. Very, very helpful. Very much appreciated. And finally, life is all about the 3 C's: choice, change, and chance. So make a choice to take a chance and change your life. And I hope you all have a fantastic week this week. Thank you again so very much for listening. So until next time, see ya.
Hi, Lou. It's Lauren Winokur Kaplan from Hillsborough, New Jersey. I'm just calling because I'm really excited. I just completed an 11-mile run today in 2.5 hours, and it's in prep for this coming weekend's Disney Princess Half Marathon. I have never run, ever, but I had 2 childhood girlfriends who were going to run the half, and it was an excuse to go to Disney World with them for a weekend, so I have been training, and I can't believe that the race is a week from tomorrow at God knows how early in the morning. But I hope to see you there cheering on the sidelines. I may scream your name as I race by you. But I'm so excited, and I also want to thank you because it's your podcast that I run to, and they get me through a very monotonous run that I do. So I'm definitely going to have to download some so I can listen to them as I do the half marathon next weekend. All right, Lou, thanks so much, and hope to see you next weekend. Bye.
You've got a friend.